I had a question actually for Catherine.
Go for it.
It was actually around the sort of final point you made in the presentation, which is about the fact that your fans are not just there for Christmas, but they're forever. I'm
glad you remembered my final point.
Thank you very much. But I was actually interested in whether there would be, in whether the fact that someone has liked you at some point, sometimes you have sort of gates in order to get discounts, etc., etc., and whether they're then valid fans, and whether there would be at some point in the future the opportunity to have people like your page and become fans anew, because people's likes and dislikes change over time. But once you've, and I know you've obviously got the unlike button and things like that, but most people I think probably can't be bothered to go around unliking lots of brands which they may previously have liked.
Yeah. I guess it comes back to not using, I suppose, one-off incentives as your strategy for fan recruitment. So naturally, if you're trying to and a lot of, in the last couple of years, a lot of marketing managers, online marketing managers are being tasked on the sheer number of Facebook fans that they can build in a given amount of time. So that's where we see things like people liking pages just to get an offer, people, brands like gating pages so that you can't see certain things or you can't avail of certain things unless you're a fan. We would advise against that as much as possible, and it's back to making sure that your fan base is quality over quantity. So if you need to know who are the customers, your current customers who are most valuable to you, and trying to make sure as much as possible that that's what your Facebook fan base reflects. So you never want to have the case where someone likes your page and maybe they've fallen out with the brand because you've done something bad to lose their custom, and that's probably a real life issue as much as it is a Facebook issue. But we definitely, a fan base should be solid and stable, and then grow over time as much as you want to boost it. That answers the question.
Thank you.
I actually had a question for the panel while I was here. I heard a lot of the, I know Craig's now departed, but I heard a lot of the social media monitoring tools talking about communities and analysing communities and building communities and working with them. And I think it's very easy to identify communities in areas like music and even professions, because generally those communities are held together by shared interests, but you find that interests are not so richly shared in areas like current accounts and insurance and tax and things like that. So how do you go about identifying communities in areas where there isn't much topical cohesion between people?
Why don't I try first, and then obviously Ross can get a better answer. But my first thought on that was that it was the people on social media don't talk about things that don't interest them. And if you've got a brand that's about, a bank brand, you'd like to be talked about if you've done something wrong. Do something right, you won't be talked about. We talk about exceptional customer service, not quite good customer service. They talk about quite bad customer service all the way through to terrible. So if you're looking for communities, it will be, the first challenge you've got is that most people are talking about a brand which doesn't cause excitement or generate great love. You'll have to wade through a lot of negativity just because that's the nature of things. We tracked customer service, for instance, for about 200 brands, and we found only 3 had a positive, more people saying positive than negative, because customer service generally is something you complain about, not praise. There are exceptions, of course, but in the round, that's what happens. So it may be that if you've got a bland brand, there isn't a community, and what you should focus on is just making sure people who have had a bad experience get redress for that, and then they might speak more positively about you. So I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but I'd be focused on the fact that if there's 100 people talking about you and 80 of them are moaning, you don't want to build a community out of 20, you want to make the 80 happy.
I was actually at a conference last week, and there was a guy there speaking from Intuit, which is, I think, on the various charts which come out regularly, is the 4th most social brand in the world, and they produce financial software for SMEs. So maybe that type of brand where perhaps the general population isn't really that interested in those types of topics, and what they and what also many other brands have done is that, such as sort of SAP, Logitech, etc. They've created their own communities. So there actually are, when you go and look, there actually are people who are interested in chatting about tax, and there are people who are interested in chatting about webcams and all sorts of things. And what they so you've then got really 2 options. You can either try to tap into those existing communities, or you can actually build your own. Now, neither of us actually offer that type of software, but there are sort of an array of different software platforms out there. And then, obviously, if you've got that community which you own, then you can nurture and grow those communities. And obviously there are all sorts of ROI discussions around the amount of money which you can save by utilising those communities for things like customer service. I think giffgaff, the mobile company owned by Telefonica, now claim to be able to answer 90 or 100% of customer queries in 93 seconds, purely through online communities which they've built, and that's through the majority of those queries are answered by their clients rather than obviously their own staff. Thank
you. If it doesn't exist already, what plans are there for the Google Plus mobile app to offer direct purchasing for consumers, i.e. possibly location-based or interest-based, directly through the app?
So I haven't heard anything about Google Plus specifically, but I know they're planning, or they have things in place for Google Wallet, and it is the objective of the company to add this social layer to every product. So, although there's nothing we've heard of, wait and see.
Please, go ahead.
I think this is probably a Google question again, but at the beginning you mentioned targeting, this is for big paid search, targeting different devices. Are there any case studies or any circumstances under which I'd want to target a particular device?
I think it's a case of looking at your own data first, so your analytics package, and looking at what traffic sources have you received that have been really good for your website, so good traffic sources. Possibly with smartphone devices you mightn't see the full picture there because it's basically whatever actions they completed on this device, and you won't see cross-device actions. But you might see some telling signs there that iPhone users, for instance, it's maybe the site renders better on it than an Android and you've better conversion rates, so you might want to target them more, or iPad users for instance. But definitely in terms of messaging, in ad text and paid search, I would emphasize the fact that you now know something about the user, so you know they're on a particular device. So even if it's an iPad device, you might want to say to them fully functional on tablets website or whatever it is, even though it might be the desktop site that just is functional on the tablet device, to try and improve click-through rates.
I have a question for Catherine. Noticed recently when going to the TripAdvisor website that it automatically logged in to my Facebook account and presented recommendations from my friends on destinations, comments. Is that something that is actively being rolled out by Facebook, or is it something that they've integrated themselves? Do you see it becoming the norm across a range of sites? Am I likely to log into Sainsbury's and see what people are telling me to buy?
Well, I mean, I guess that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the social graph powering those businesses. It shouldn't be happening without your permission. So you should be. That's something that TripAdvisor are doing. And if you've chosen to log in through TripAdvisor with Facebook, their goal is to make your TripAdvisor experience better by not just showing you the top recommendations from the community, but the top recommendations from your friends. So if we're friends and you know that I've got pretty good taste in, I don't know, beach hotels. I don't, by the way, but if you knew that, so recommendations from me appearing in your feed on TripAdvisor, we believe are obviously more relevant to you than recommendations from the community. So the more and more, some grocery sites are doing it, lots of shopping sites, Etsy was just one example, but more and more shopping websites are enabling either connect with Facebook or log on with Facebook or Facebook plugins throughout their sites. It's driving more traffic for them, but it's also creating a better experience for the shoppers themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is related to what he just asked to Google and Facebook. The most interesting thing I've seen during the Google Plus social presentation the other day was a little icon on the screen which said sign in with Google Plus, which means that probably Google Open Graph will be created as well as a Facebook Open Graph. And I'm wondering how much in the future you expect that the platform themselves will be the place where people will be sharing information, how much instead you will be integrating with any websites via the Open Graph approach.
Ladies first.
We had ours first, so I'll answer first. I mean, it's up to the individual publishers themselves. I mean, ultimately, we believe that when it comes to Facebook, a good Facebook strategy means thinking about your page and thinking about platforms. So, some brands, depending on their objectives, will concentrate more on one than the other. But if you've got a goal to have multiple touch points with your consumer, be that real world, be it your website, leveraging the Facebook social graph, leveraging plugins, be they connect or log on or whatever that might be, is ultimately going to make your Facebook strategy a much more successful one. So that's why we equally balance your publishing and your platform strategy.
I would say that we're very, very early days. We've only launched a limited number of APIs at the moment. Some interesting APIs are the Hangouts API that you saw before, game developers building features onto Hangouts. I think it's more of a point of watch this space, but we certainly have the Open Connect migrating over to Google Plus Connect, so you will see more in the not too distant future.
Well, I have a question about how you monitor the positive and negative feedbacks related to the social media. So, what about the sarcastic comments, since there are maybe many? I'm not an expert, so I don't know how you monitor if a comment is positive, is negative, or is sarcastic. Sarcastic maybe is negative at the end, but maybe you can consider that as positive. So, is there a way, or the filtering something?
So we test our automated sentiment detectors. So we look at a blog and see a post, a blog, a tweet, see if it's positive or negative about the brand we're tracking. When we put two people who we spend a lot of time training on it to agree to things, they agree 79% of the time. So two people find it difficult to agree whether it's positive or negative or neutral more than 4 out of 5 times. And our computer gets it right 6 out of 10 times. So sarcasm is not our only problem. Our own, kind of just the nature of human language is it's very complicated. One of the breakthroughs that we had after struggling with this and trying lots of different third-party text analytics and hiring our own army of PhDs was to just tell people you can get a lot more insight if you start reading what people are saying than just relying on the automated sentiment, and then setting up what you think are the right kind of categories, and they can be automated because we just pick up the keywords you're after and then read those. But if you're using a social media monitoring tool, if you're using Brandwatch or Sysomos or Radian 6 and you're not reading the mentions, then the interesting ones, then you're not using the tool. If you're trying to use the automated sentiment, then you're missing the real value, I think.
Yeah, I'd probably echo those thoughts. I think, I mean, at various players we sort of talk about contextual analysis, so you're understanding which entity within a sentence people are referring to. But it's not an exact science. The English, unfortunately, compared to pretty much every other race on earth, are very sarcastic, which doesn't help us particularly. And then there's also the sort of sentiment analysis across multiple languages. So you've got sentence structure, etc., etc. So there are complexities, and it's not a perfect science. And I probably echoes Brian's thoughts that it's valid when you're looking at large sets of data. If you're using it for micro analysis, then yes, you will find imperfections in that, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Warren.
Just a question for the panel overall. Lots of CEOs, CMOs, senior executives in organisations run their business by series of warning lights, such as Net Promoter Score and other very well established metrics that tell them whether the business is going in the right directions. So, and they've often developed fairly useful and robust models and correlations that show, we do this, we get an increase in NPS, and that increases profits or footfall or retention or so on and so forth. So now I'm telling them to look at their fans and their clout and their cred and their +1. Are there any models or pieces of work you guys have done or experienced in designing or observing correlations between any of these metrics and, bottom line metrics that CEOs and CMOs run their business on?
If I can, I'll speak first. I think we believe that Facebook it's the same metrics that brand marketers care about. So it's ROI, it's reach, it's resonance of your brand message, and it's I'd call it engagement, but so likes and fans are really only symbols for those things. So we sort of will always boil it back to those marketing metrics. So and it's very objective focused. So we try not to create any more complex models than already exist out there, but really to feed into existing marketing objectives. We believe you can achieve a reach and a scale on Facebook that's comparable, in some cases can't be achieved elsewhere, and that translates. I showed a few examples very, very quickly there, but to any number of marketing objectives, and really trying to solve those. So that's how we look at it, if that's helpful.
I'll piggyback off of that. I don't even know if you use piggyback in the UK as a term. We certainly have seen, working with Hydra and integrating all the different data points that are usually involved in a given customer's journey, that coming back to what Catherine was saying, there are specific metrics that are actually determining the success of a business, and that those are things that we can never keep our eyes off of. The conversions, the cost of those conversions, how much money you're actually generating for those strategies, whether they are social, whether they are search, whether they're related to display, are areas that as a marketer you can't ignore at any point in time. So I think what we're trying to achieve in that, and where the model is being turned on its head a little bit with the work that we are doing, is in actually trying to pinpoint where these metrics actually come together, and whether the ROI that you are deriving from specific channels is a true ROI. And again, coming back to what I was saying during the presentation, in many instances, if you actually isolate those channels and don't look at the effects that they have on each other, then you may be under the impression that you're actually maximizing the return on investment that you're getting from them. But when you put the picture together, when you put all those different pieces of the puzzle together, you maybe realize that in many instances you are your own worst enemy. You are the one that's actually cannibalizing the return that you could be getting from search by the way in which you're doing social media, or the return that you're getting from natural search by the way you're doing paid search, and vice versa. So I guess what I'd recommend off of this is don't make the mistake of looking at things in isolation. There's a correlation of all of these different channels coming together, and by this I don't just mean digital. Your above the line activity will have a knockdown effect on that as well. So be smart about that analysis and consider the full picture, because that's the only way you will be able to improve that return on investment as a whole.
Just from Google's point of view, in Google Analytics there's a new social report where you can actually analyse social traffic coming to your website, and within that report it really focuses on prior visits to site of users, not just their last visit, so not just like a last click typically with ad text on PPC ads. So really looking at the assisting nature of those visits, and are they having an effect to your bottom line on goals on site or revenue as well as an e-commerce player. And it's really, those reports look at different traffic sources, so the different social networks, and it looks at how valuable the traffic is, the quality of that traffic you're receiving from each network, to make informed decisions about your activity on that network, but as well to try and get more traffic from that particular network if it's good. For example, some retailers are seeing really good results from Pinterest traffic, really high conversion rates. And then within those reports as well, there's changes you can integrate Google Analytics to your site. So there's a social plugin there, for instance, where you can integrate, if you wish, if you've integrated with Facebook, you can look at pages that have received likes and what has happened to users on those pages as a result. You can also look at comments that are posted publicly on any of the social networks that give us that feed for Google Analytics. So Dig, Reddit, Google+, you can actually look at the links that send traffic to your website from public comments on those social networks, as an example. So I'd recommend to have a look at that. If you just Google Google Analytics social reports, more information will be there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. It's been a great session. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for the investment. And thanks, everybody, for coming along. It wouldn't have been the same without you. There are refreshments outside in reception. Yeah, you are allowed to laugh. That was a joke. Thank you.